Recovery. I'm Rob. You see me all the time, so I'm going to allow my guest to jump on here and introduce herself because she's probably why you clicked on the video anyway. So, Christina, welcome to the channel.
Hi, yeah, I'm Christina. I am over 4.5 years in recovery from gambling, and a lot of the stuff that I will do pertains to women in gambling, and just advocating for safe spaces for women in recovery. And yeah, it's been a busy year.
Awesome.
It's been a really
Yeah, what have
busy year.
been doing a lot of speaking events and stuff.
Yeah, I think I've hit almost every state this year, and then 3 different countries. So it's been a wild year. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I don't blame you. What else are you allowed to talk about the country that you visited yet, or is that still kind of a secret?
Yeah, I can go ahead and just kind of I can share parts of it, you know.
Sure.
Um so the first and I just want to take it back to before I entered recovery. Like, I never really traveled. I went on a few vacations, but within my active addiction, like, I obviously didn't have money to go anywhere. I didn't have the energy to go anywhere. Um all I did was just work and sleep and gamble. And so it's like entering recovery gave me a life that I never would have expected. Even if I think even if I hadn't had the gambling struggle, like, I'm not sure that I was ever that person that wanted to really leave, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
Yeah.
Um and then when I entered recovery and started doing this work and started the Broke Girl Society podcast, and then I got a lot of opportunities to come and share about the work that I'm doing. And so that led me to one of the biggest opportunities this year, and that was to take part in a movie that's coming out. It's like a documentary movie about people who have overcome some tremendous struggles and taken those struggles and used them for good. And it,
Awesome.
it was paired up with a project, where we're helping a community. And so that was filmed in Honduras,
Great.
and that was an amazing experience, an amazing opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, when it comes out, we're going to be blasting it on the channel. You're going to be so famous that your name's just going to become a keyword that I can use to get people to watch the video.
I
But
don't have a desire to be that famous. I really don't. I
well,
would be okay if it didn't come out, to be honest. At this point, I would just be like, now that it's getting closer and will probably be out in the next few months,
mm,
I just have a pit in my stomach of like, how are people going to receive it? Um, what is it gonna like? I don't think it's not gonna change my life, really. Like, I
mm,
am it's going to be probably geared towards a particular crowd. It's going to be a limited thing in the theaters, but it will go to streaming. But I can't see it being like this life changing. I mean, it was a life changing experience and the opportunity to get to do it,
sure.
and that I'm forever grateful for.
Well, you never know. So we will see. But so if you're in the chat right now, Christina and I are both in recovery from gambling, and we're going to be answering any questions that you have about gambling, gambling addiction, or addiction recovery. We're also going to be able to pin some of the questions onto screen so that the audience can kind of see what we're reacting to as we go. And the very first comment said hello. The very second comment said, uh, hello, says this. So just quit on day 2 of the non-gambling journey. Very happy to have you here, my friend.
Nice.
Hopefully we see a lot of messages like this over the next hour or however long we end up going live. But if you're in the audience, feel free to share, what's been going on in your life, any questions that you might have. And the number one way you can support us to get this to more people, to grow this message a little bit, is to hit the like button. YouTube will push it out to more people, more questions, more answers. It's a lovely, lovely chain of events. So
Love it.
until we get a question, I'm going to pick my own and I'm going to ask it. And I'm actually going to type it up. Why did you quit gambling? Christina, why did you quit gambling?
Well, my gambling got to a point where I remember it used to be fun. It used to be something I could do to kill some time. So just for a little bit of reference, I'm in a state where gambling is everywhere. But I mean, as far as casinos go, we don't have online and legal online, and we don't have sports betting. But we have over 140 casinos in our state, and they're everywhere. And fortunately, it's not as bad as some other states where they're in delis and bars and everywhere you go. But
Mm.
these are huge Vegas style casinos, and within about 30 minutes of me, where I am right now, within about 10 minutes of me, there's three huge casinos. And
Mm.
where I was living though at the time, within about 30, 45 minutes, I could be to 8 different casinos. I mean, it
Wow.
was everywhere. And so when I first started gambling, it was more just I preferred it over the bars.
Mm.
It just felt safer. Um, and so I found myself gambling a lot. And so at the beginning, it was more of just like, hey, something to do. But towards the end, it had just impacted my life in
Mm.
every single way. And that's not what gambling is ever intended for. It's intended to be something that's sporadic and fun and entertaining. And when it starts to cause an issue in your life, whether it doesn't necessarily have to be a financial issue, right? There's some people who gamble to harm in other ways. Like they may have the
Mm.
financial means to do it, but it impacts their relationship, their job. It impacts our communities in a way because we're not as engaged or active. All these different ways when it starts to kind of take over. So it's one of those things where if it starts to become a problem in any way, it's a problem. And
Sure.
it's important to address it then so that it doesn't become our stories, right? Where we're where it takes us just so far away from who we are. And that's what it did for me. It took me so far away from the person I wanted to be and the goals that I had for myself. And, it ultimately was making me feel like I didn't want to be here anymore. And the struggle was real and something had to change. And so that's what initially did it after 15 years.
And I think one point that you said is like, we don't want people in the audience to go through the same thing. We don't want them to end up going as far down that path. And that's the main reason that I make content on this channel is like I felt for a really long time when I was gambling that I was the only person on earth that had a problem. Little did I know that was not the case at all. But when I felt that way, it also kind of led to the belief that like if I'm the only person with this problem, then there's no way to get help for it because no one else can relate to it. No one else knows what I'm going through. And maybe that was an extreme belief, but I've been told I'm an extreme person, and so it didn't bode well for me at all. But the reason that I quit gambling was because I had gotten to a point where I started to ask myself the question, why did you just do that after I would gamble? And I actually started not to have an answer that made sense anymore. So in the beginning, it was like, hey, I did that to make the game more fun. I did that to make money. I did that because I like sports. I did that because it's fun. And by the end, I was doing it because I was used to doing it. And
Yeah.
so after sitting on a toilet and spinning away all the money that I had on a slot machine when I was on a vacation, I asked myself, like, why did you just do that? And I didn't need the money. I didn't have fun. It wasn't enjoyable. I had no answer. And that was kind of what got the ball rolling for me eventually. Wasn't so clean cut, but did eventually happen. So if you're in the audience and you have questions about gambling, gambling addiction, or addiction recovery, feel free to ask them. It looks like we got one now. Looks like it's a couple questions. So we're gonna do our best to touch on them. And it might block our faces. We might have to reach up like this. But but how did you deal with the guilt of gambling addiction and letting people down? Do you want me to start or do you want to start, Christina?
You go ahead and start.
So, I mean, the guilt of the addiction and letting people down, I think that one positive piece of news is that as you recover, as you begin to get better, like naturally, a lot of relationships can be repaired as you're reestablishing that trust. So, rather than trying to think about it like guilt, I tried to reframe it as like a learning lesson. I don't want to let people down anymore. I don't want to do that thing again. So, let me change what I'm doing. Guilt usually isn't a great motivator, and it usually kind of justifies doing extreme things to assuage the guilt to make yourself feel better about it. And so I think that dealing with guilt is turning it into something that can be a positive rather than just sitting with it and being sad about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think guilt and shame can keep us stuck in maybe not necessarily like even if we've pulled ourselves out of the gambling patterns, like the guilt and
Mhm.
shame can keep us stuck and kind of spinning our wheels because it's just such a they're heavy, heavy feelings. And for me, I think what helped me, and like sometimes I still have a little bit of just remorse of my behaviors and things I did when I was gambling. But I think what helped me the most was just working that living amends and to myself and to the people that I impacted by showing up for myself, by focusing on my recovery, by making those changes. To me, that's a living amends to not only myself, but the people that I impacted and hurt. Some things, most things will get fixed with time. There's
Mm.
no, that's the thing. We have no control over anybody else in their healing. So we can
Yeah.
only work on ourselves. And by putting our recovery into action, and you get away from some of those heavier emotions, and you start to feel better, and they don't keep you stuck. But we can get stuck in the cycles of like shame and guilt. And that's, it's not, it's important to acknowledge, but it shouldn't, hold us back. We've got to keep moving forward, and doing that living amends, and making different choices, and showing up better, and putting our actions into our words into action. Those are the things that really, I think, help me the most.
Yeah. And there was also a piece of that of like forgiveness, but I think you kind of touched on it. It's like just keep moving forward, keep doing the right thing, and if are people will forgive you at their own pace. We can't really control it. Now another question came in, and I'm really happy that you're here, Christina, because if I tried to answer this question, I don't think there's a way that I could do it without sounding like a douche. So I think this is perfect that you're here. So a woman on her own who just wants to have some entertainment in a safe place is nothing to feel ashamed of. We can't help that that is what entertains us and helps us de-stress. So it's not necessarily a question, but if this is something that is my happy place, it's the only place where I feel safe, it's the only place where I feel okay. Let's talk about that because this sounds a little bit like maybe something you might have experienced.
Yeah, so I'm going to maybe come at this at a different angle, and it may be an unpopular thing for, like, I see this a lot on
Absolutely.
TikTok, because there is so much conversation about the harms of gambling, right? And that
Mhm.
is because there are so many people impacted by gambling. But then what I'm starting to see too is something similar to this on like TikTok, where people are doing it within their means. They're doing it in a safe, healthy way. I'm actually going to answer this in two parts. So for the first part, like, you shouldn't feel shame to go and do something that's fun and entertaining for you. I think if anything out of any of these messages that are shared from people who have been impacted or harmed by gambling, it really is just caution, right? All right. So now what I can say to this is what you just said was the exact reason I started gambling, right? I started gambling because it was an entertaining and safe place. It was well lit, and it just felt safer than the bars. So that was the very, and to distress, right? To blow off steam from a long work week. So there, the two-part answer is that that's exactly how I started, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be your path. Like, but the reason why we share that our stories and we do this work is because in case that version ends up being my version, like, we just want you to hear our message and be like, hey, set that time in that budget. As long as you're not causing yourself harm, as long as it still maintains fun, you're paying your bills, and you're doing it in a way that is what it's meant for, entertaining, because a majority of the population can gamble normally. A majority of the population can drink normally, or take prescription drugs normally, or whatever, right? But these messages are more aligned with, one, prevention and just awareness, but two, we don't want to see people struggle the way that we did. It took me
Mhm.
15 years to figure this out. And like, and I want to touch on what Rob said, where he felt like he was alone. I felt like I was alone. 90% of the people I talked to who have struggled felt like they were alone. So the whole reason why we're doing this message is just to share our own stories, and to let you know that people are impacted by gambling. Whether that's your story or not, that's for you to decide. But one thing I'm going to leave you with is, even from the early days of me going up there before it was causing harm, I still felt a little bit of shame. I it was never something I shared with people, even from the earliest days. So just, if it's safe and it's for you, then it's for you. I'm not here to tell you not to gamble. I'm just here to tell you, be aware of it.
I mean, when you make content online, it's usually better to take an extreme opinion in terms of content performance. So a lot of times when people will say like, should I do this? My answer is always like probably not because it makes more sense to go down that path just to kind of that's the way these algorithms are designed, right? You have to take a stance, pick one side or the other. But the truth is definitely in that gray area. It's like I could tell you not to do something, but I will never meet you. I will never see you. I don't know who you are or where you live. I don't know how you feel or what you're doing when you're gambling. So seeing things like that, it's just like, usually if I was to make like a TikTok about it, I'm kind of pigeonholed into saying like one thing's good, one thing's bad. But Christina's answer is very diplomatic and it gets to the point. If you're not experiencing harm, just be aware of what's going on. And when it becomes a problem, that's when you have to take action rather
Yeah.
than what we did and we let it go for an extra long period of time before we sought out help.
Like, understand the signs, but kind of where I was going with that too is like I've seen this trend on like TikTok and things like that where they've talked about having to defend the fact that they gamble. Like it's like, why do I feel like I have to defend it just because some people can't do it right? You know what I mean? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure her comment was very um, hey, I just want to talk about this, and I love that. Like, let's talk about it. And why is she getting shame or feeling shame for something that she's doing in a healthy way? Like, that is such a tough area to be in. But I think with anything, it's just we're just trying to share that it can cause harm, and here's kind of some signs.
Exactly. And throughout the next hour or so, or however long we're live here, Christina and I are going to be answering questions from you guys about gambling, gambling addiction, and addiction recovery. We're both in recovery, so we have two unique perspectives of anything that you're dealing with, any kind of struggles or signs of a problem, or if you think like, is doing this a gambling problem? Ask us, and we'll let you know to the best of our ability. But the number one way that you can support us to reach more people is to just leave a like on this video. And as we're going, hopefully we get to your question.
And I just want to say
Oh
this,
yeah,
that I am a middle-aged woman giving my perspective. Rob is a middle-aged 20 something giving his perspective. So it is a very, very different perspective.
yeah, I was thinking, yeah, I'm getting there, middle age. I had a couple beers yesterday at an Oktoberfest, and I had to sleep until 11 to feel okay. I'm not the way I used to be. I can tell you that.
Wait
Um,
until you hit your 30s.
it's not
It's
too much
completely.
longer.
And then you hit
It's
your
really
40s and hit inner perimenopause. It's just going to be brutal for you, Rob. I feel so bad for
So the
you.
next question. So it's a shame that a lot of these questions are really long. So when I put them on stream, it's gonna cover your face. If you want, like, just poke your head up a little bit. But if not, it's okay. Uh, like when these pop on. But we had this one come in. Do you miss the excitement of the casino? And how do you find the motivation to enjoy other activities? Gambling's so exciting that other activities feel boring. And I can take this one to start. If you've reached the point that gambling is the only thing that feels exciting, you most definitely have a gambling problem. Now, the reason that this is the case is because as we gamble as people who are developing a problem, our tolerance for the amount of pleasure or thrill that we get from activities changes. And we have to keep doing riskier things or betting bigger or betting more often to keep feeling that same rush. So, this idea of what can I find that will be as exciting as gambling that I can do? The only answers to that are actual things are other things that you will get addicted to. So, it's alcohol, it's drugs, it's bad stuff if you're just going to move from one thing to the other. Now, a key to remember is that as you stop gambling, that tolerance that you've built up begins to reset back towards the normal baseline. It's a process called neuroplasticity. And when you get back to that baseline, you can enjoy things like going out to eat, going for a walk, playing sports with your friends, the things that you used to enjoy probably. But until that point, it's kind of normal that everything's going to feel a little bit boring because you're used to this insane thrill. Christina, when you quit gambling, how long did it take to start to enjoy normal things again?
It took a while. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It took a while. But I was also at the point with my gambling that there at the end, like I didn't even want to be there. I didn't know why I was there. It was like an autopilot thing. So I wasn't experiencing the excitement anymore. It was definitely an addictive behavior and pattern. I'd caused so much harm to myself and the people I cared about that for me, when I finally ended it, like I didn't have, like I talked to so many people who have those feelings of like, oh, I really miss the excitement of gambling. I wish I could do it without the consequences and those types of things. And it's like, I never really struggled with missing it. Even to this day, like I might hear a sound that sounds similar, or we went to an arcade yesterday for my nephew's birthday party, and it was very casino like. And
Mm.
I actually got a little bit overwhelmed with it. But for me, I think it probably took a good year before like I could find other things to fill my time. But then I dived it right into like doing the Broke Girl Society and my podcast. So that took up a lot of my time. So I can't really give you like a definitive answer around that. But I talk to people all the time who say like normal things feel boring now. And my biggest advice to that is don't compare them. Like, don't compare them in the moment of like, oh, gambling's exciting, but doing this hobby that I used to love just doesn't do it anymore. And it's like, and that's okay. But the further you move away from the gambling and the more you engage in different hobbies or get curious about something else that might be really fun, you know, getting involved in communities and things like that can offer you just more, of that value. Um, those are things that are all really, really helpful in that. But there's no good answer for that. Like it may feel like that for a while, but the further you get away from the gambling, and that means watching gambling, that means playing like fake games or whatever. Like the further you get away from just those activities and those behaviors, your brain starts to rewire. And I think Rob said it more eloquently than I did, but you do get further away from it. You do start to engage in normal things, and that starts to feel really good. Like now I'm doing watercolor and reading books easier, and like things, I'm engaging in normal things and I'm loving it again. So, it probably took a good year or so for it to start to just feel that way.
Those hobbies are so much more mature than what I do. I've been playing. I went to a. Did I tell you this? I went
Yes.
to a Pokemon tournament. Yeah, I played. I got destroyed by these kids. They were so good. But that's what I've been doing. So there's more questions rolling in. But again, as a reminder, if you have any questions about gambling, gambling addiction, or addiction recovery, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're doing our best to answer what pops up. And if I miss your question, please just ask it again. We'll get to you. Now, for this one, just briefly, if you want help to stop gambling, in the description of this live video, I've included the video that I made that's about an hour long. So it is not short, but it's exactly what I did to quit and stay clean from gambling. We can touch on this briefly if you have extra points, but I think that's usually what I say. It's just like check out that longer video. It does better justice than trying to spit it out in 30 seconds for me.
Yeah, and just Google resources that are available to you. Like there's a lot of apps and community groups, and I'm not sure where you are, obviously, from this, but like find communities that are working on it together. That my biggest advice is just don't try and do it alone. Find somebody to help you navigate.
100%. I wanted to put this one on stream. It's not a question, but I wanted you to read it. So your story is very helpful. People love it. Keep coming back. Keep telling it. And every time we post one of your stories, everyone watches it. So feel free to come on like every video if you want.
Thank you, Heather. I really appreciate that. And I hope my answer didn't to the other question. I hope that you understood where I was coming from with that. So thank you for that.
Could you
Trying
do
to
a
like
self-exclusion?
set up, but
Yeah, it's just really bulky. It takes up like a quarter, like a third of the screen. Anyways, but could you do a self-exclusion from any website you're on, then quit cold turkey? Would that work, or would GA be recommended? So the way that I look at like self-exclusion, like something like Gamban, something blocking yourself, what I would say that is like adding friction. It's making it more difficult, it's making it more difficult to gamble, but just running away from the problem isn't really going to solve the root of it. So it's going to take more than that. Does that mean you have to go to GA? No. But it does mean that there's some character work to be done. It means maybe a therapy lesson or session. It might mean daily reflections. It might mean working on becoming a better person. But just running away from the problem is more of a Band-Aid fix than an actual long-term solution.
Yeah, recovery is actually doing the work, like gambling or spending or food or, some of these other behavioral addictions oftentimes are just symptoms of internal issues. So it really is kind of, and I hear people are like, I had a good childhood. I don't have any internal issues. And they're like, there's always something. It could be boredom, loneliness, stress. It could be so many things. But really, it is getting down to the root cause, and that kind of stops that compulsive behavior. But yeah, working with a therapist is helpful. Any kind of support group, there's so many of them out there, whether they're GA specific or, I mean, there's like Smart Recovery, which is amazing. It's more of like science-based, neuro-based. And it's non-secular, and they don't do a lot of the same things that GA does. There's Recovery Dharma, which is more Buddhist. There's so many other ways that you can join a program that's helpful. Yeah. And there's a really great app that Rob and I both are involved in called Evive, and it has a lot of like learning lessons so that you can kind of learn more about your behaviors around gambling and things like that. So there's a lot of great resources to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely check out Evive. I usually have a link to it in the description, but I don't think it's in this video. But if you look at like almost any other video on the channel, it probably has a link to Evive. Let me see. Let me see. I just had a spot. Every time I get a chat, it moves it to the bottom of the screen, so I have to scroll back up.
Figure your life out,
Uh,
Rob.
I know I'm working on it. You know what I figured out last week was there's like a default setting that when you display a message, it only displays for 20 seconds. So I kept putting it back up every 20 seconds,
Oh,
and there's like one button that you have to click to change it. So I was just like, it's just repetitive over and over. Let's see. Okay. How do you deal with gambling debts? Does it take a mental toll on yourself? Mine did, and I wouldn't recommend doing it the way that I did. But I essentially worked like 70 hours a week for 6 months until I paid everything off. And I had my mom control my bank account until I got to the end of that point because I didn't want to be tempted to gamble to try to get it all back at once. There's definitely a healthier way. And I think that, what did you do, Christina? Because
yeah,
it has to be
I
healthier
was
than what I
totally
did.
judging that response and like, yeah, you're 20 something, you have energy, but when you're older, like that just exhausted me talking about that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can deal with the debt impacts from gambling. Working more is, is what a lot of people choose to do. They take on a second job, they work a lot, but I think that that can take a real toll on your mental health in a different
Yeah.
way. And so it is just finding ways to have somebody help you, similar to what Rob did. I had my sister involved in my finances. She was checking my account every day. We were working out plans, things like that. That was really, really helpful. But I just made deals with credit card companies, and I literally just took it one debt at a time. You're gonna have, if you have impacts to your credit, like I I can't really speak to any of that. Like anything that happened with me, I just kept working towards and digging myself out. And now, 4.5 years in recovery, I am 90% out of my gambling debt. My credit's back to good, and like I can pretty much do anything again. And it really is just kind of working through it and piece by piece. And here's the thing with when people enter recovery is they think, oh, I want all this fixed now. Like it needs to be fixed now. It'll make me feel better, but it didn't take you that long. I mean, it took you time to get into the debt. And with recovery and the work of recovery, it's going to take you time to get out of it. And there's no usually quick fix. And sometimes the quick fixes that are available sometimes cause more harm because it wipes the slate feeling the impacts anymore. And so it's easier to kind of get back into the cycle of it.
Yeah, thinking that it has to get like lump sum paid is a big thing to overcome. And because like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, I'll feel so much better if I just get a win and then pay this off. But then you end up in the same situation because you're never fixing the root of the problem.
exactly.
If you're in the United States, which I sometimes assume based on usernames like where people might be from, which is probably not a good thing. But
Assumption.
if you're in the United States, you should check out gamfin.org. In a lot of states, they have free financial counseling. But if you're not in the United States, they don't counsel outside of it just because every country's like financial system is so different. Um, I saw one come in that I really wanted to touch on. So Patricia Roman is always commenting. So thank you for being a consistent commenter on videos. But this is a great question. I want to quit gambling while watching slot channels. Would that be okay? I thought so in the beginning. And I did it too. I'm like, this is helping me get my urge out. This is like, I can live vicariously and not have to actually spend any money. And while that might be true, what I found out was basically like mental betting, this idea of like, I'm betting through them actually prolongs the same issue in our brain for the risk reward and like the tolerance that we had built up for pleasure and for, what was the word that was looking for? Dopamine. And so this guy I work with, Dr. Ken Martz, told me it's actually bad and it continues the problem and it doesn't allow your brain to properly heal if you're watching these slot channels. So while practically it's like definitely a better thing than actually spinning the slots, it's delaying your progress in recovery is the truth, just from like the scientific lens. Have you ever heard that, Christina?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I had a doctor come on the podcast, and she was a neurologist, and
Mm,
she, I think, in the neuro field, and she talked about how through the gambling, our brain rewires itself. It rewires those reward and pleasure centers to only want the dopamine from gambling, and so
mm,
like we can stop the behavior. And some people look at it as a harm reduction, right? By watching the slots or playing like the Facebook games or whatever slot games. um but just to what you said, you're not allowing your brains to rewire and look for
mm,
dopamine in different ways, through exercising, through conversations, through all the healthier ways that you can get those hits. And so, yeah, it just kind of keeps your brain in that same pathway. And even though you're not causing yourself the financial harm or relationship harm or whatever you might have been experienced with the gambling, you're still kind of in that same, it's just like a rut. You know what I mean? Like you've got two
mm,
sides up here and you're just still kind of in that rut. And
mm.
you want to be out of it. And so it really is kind of a personal thing when you look at it, but it's definitely better to just move away from it. If you need it out of your life, it's move away from it.
Yeah, I think so too. This is a good one. I don't think I've ever answered this before. It's not in my experience either. I don't remember if it's in yours, but I think it's a good thing to kind of to think about. How to deal with the trauma with growing up with gambling parents and didn't learn financial literacy. So I watched this show, the Caleb Hammer show, where he does like he basically roasts people's finances
So
and like really
mean.
tears into them.
He's
Yeah,
so
he's
mean.
not nice, but he does say something that makes a lot of sense. It's like when people come on the show, oftentimes something that they'll say is like, I didn't grow up with any financial literacy. No one taught me how to manage a budget. No one taught me this. And he's like, that's like 95% of the people that exist on earth. And it's just like, there are ways, and I don't want to sound insensitive in this answer, I guess, but what I'm trying to say is like, I didn't grow up with financial literacy either. I didn't have gambling parents, but like this idea of how to be financially literate, how to be financially responsible, it's something that we all have to kind of learn. And if we're not fortunate enough to have had like someone directly teach us all these things, we have to go out and learn it ourselves. We can't use it as an excuse to continue a bad behavior. Now, in terms of growing up with the gambling parents, that's a whole different story. I would imagine that's something that would be useful to go to counseling for, would you say?
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like I've never really answered this. As far as I've talked more about the financial literacy, like they don't really teach it like in, of course, I'm in Oklahoma. We're 50th in the state right now. So they don't really teach financial literacy in our schools. So it's a really interesting thing. So unless your parents are like sitting down and they're like, I've seen kids whose parents have savings accounts for them, and like when they help them budget their allowance or their jobs. And it's like I never had a mother who, I was raised by a single mother who really struggled. And and I think I've heard too, like people who've had gambling parents, they learn to pay their bills when the cutoff notice comes in, right? And that's what they think is normal. And so, I mean, it's a really good point. But I had no appreciation or understanding of finances, of my own personal finances. Now, I have an accounting background and I could do the maths, right? But for my own personal way, I've just never had a good respect for money, which is another thing I think that kind of piece that led into the addiction part, is because with the gambling addiction disorder, however you identify, like you really, really lose the value of money. It becomes this
Mm,
monopoly money. And so you're not really seeing it go away. You're just, it's just the whole part of the disorder. So when you're in recovery, one of the biggest things you have to do is really learn to respect money again, really understand that money should be working for you and not against you. And those things. And Rob mentioned it earlier. GamFin has amazing financial, and this is not a sales pitch. Like it's just a
mm,
really great resource. They have really good financial counselors who are firms. And so they're not going to shame you. They're not going to be like, they're not going to be Caleb on you and be like, what? You're stupid. What are you talking about? They're going to be like, hey, I get this. Let's see what we can do to make a path forward. They're not
mm,
there to sell you anything or solve your problem. They're just there to help you build it out. Like, what does it look like contacting the credit card companies and setting up arrangements and asking for lower interest? And those are things that we have to do for ourselves. We need to I think with when we struggled with a disorder as badly as I did, um, like I had to go in and clean up so much stuff and I had to learn how to do it. And through that work, I really learned the value of money, and like used to, I would think I need a new car every 2 years. And now I'm like, I'm going to drive this thing till the wheels fall off, because I don't want the payment anymore. And it's just like,
Mm,
you learn this I came out of my recovery, and this is, I can only speak to my own experience, but just with a healthier respect of money and debt. And, I'm scared to death of credit cards now, like because I abused them so poorly. But again, I wasn't mirrored that in my relationship growing up either. But I have a twin sister, and we grew up in the same house in the same way. And she has always been so good with money. Like, so a lot of it too is our own personality traits and things that we do. So she grew up in the same way, but she just came out of it with a different appreciation of money. And,
mm.
so
That's an interesting thing that you should make a piece of content about. If I were you, but we'll see.
yeah.
We'll see. Now, a quick message to the audience. If you're watching, please do me the favor of hitting the like button on the video. It'll push it out to more people so that we get more questions. I've seen a lot of people make comments and questions that I haven't gotten to answer. And if that has been the case, one, thank you for being here. Thank you for asking your questions. And two, we'll do our best to get to them. Sometimes the questions that come in are too country specific for it to be broadly applicable to the audience that's watching the video. And that's maybe why it wasn't answered. But please keep asking questions, and we're going to do our best to get to as many as we can. Now, this one popped in. I thought it was a good question. How did you deal with friendships that were built on gambling? Did you have to walk away from friendships or people who gamble responsibly? So, in my case, what I did was basically say, hey guys, I have a gambling addiction. And they were like, oh, okay. And then we kind of just stopped talking about gambling. So, I had friends that I gambled with, but no one that ever gambled to the extent that I did. And so it really wasn't that difficult of a conversation. Now, in other people's cases, they might be in a situation where the only thing that they do with those friends is gamble. And if you express that you have a problem to them and they still keep pressuring you and still keep making you go back to it, that's maybe a point to consider walking away. But usually it's just having a conversation solves like 95% of the problems, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think being open, and that's easier to say than it is to do. I understand that, especially when you just don't want to share that you're struggling with it. But sometimes just giving them an explanation is better than ghosting them or like not being around them, because they're going to wonder why. And so it's better to just say, hey, I need to step back from gambling for a while. I want to work on this or do this. You don't have to be like, I'm really hurting myself with this. You can just be like, I'm stepping back. I just need you to respect that, because one of the biggest things in recovery is setting those firm boundaries from early on. And that's really identifying what you need to do to stay safe in your recovery and to continue um, in that path. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I think I struggled with in early, because I ended up walking away from friendships
Mm,
because of, not necessarily because they were my gambling buddies, but because their friendships weren't healthy in the way that I
mm,
needed to be in my life. And so um it is a really hard thing, and especially if like I created this whole social network at the casinos. Like I would go in and like the wait staff would be like, oh, here's your Dr. Pepper,
oh, you and
and
your
you know what
Dr.
I mean,
Pepper.
like, huh?
I
Yeah, I know.
said you and your Dr.
I
Pepper.
love
I
Dr.
get
Pepper.
it.
But yeah, so it'd be like they'd bring it right to me, and it and they would chit chat with me all night. But it was that realization that I was also giving them 20s every time I won. And like,
Mm,
how deep was the actual relationships? They were just social relationships that really kind of depended on me gambling. And it wasn't going to be something that I could carry on in my life. So
yeah. I think a lot of times people have this idea that gambling is a way to make friends, it's a way to be social, and it ends up being like a very much either the opposite or like fake socialization. So like when I would go to a casino, I'd play craps because I really liked being around the table and everyone would be on the same team and be cheering and stuff. Um, but then as soon as someone rolls a seven, it's like, dude, fuck you. Like we're never talking again, you know? So it's like if your friendships and relationships are dependent on gambling, there's a decent chance that they're pretty shallow ones. But if that's not the case, open communication is the way to go.
Well, think about
Let's
the
see.
VIP host, right? It's
Hmm.
their job to be
Yeah.
your friends. Like a lot of people are like, oh, well, I really like my VIP host or whatever. And it's like, well, one, what did it take to get you to that level? And two, it's literally their job to keep you engaged in gambling. So whether that's the fun, and they might generally just like their job and like being social and talking to you. So I'm not saying that, but
Mhm.
I'm just saying that you've got to look at it in a way too that it is their job
Yeah.
to be your friend and to keep you engaged. And that doesn't say much for them. I'm not saying towards them as a person, but just back to it's their job.
Yeah. And we just gotta kind of keep that mindset. But we want to feel important. We want to feel special, and so it's one of those ways when you're gambling to make you feel like you're the big shot, like everyone loves you. So I get it. I did it too. Let's see. This one essentially it's the same kind of concept. You know, there's a DJ night at this casino, and the friends want him to go to keep going back. So there's this idea in Gamblers Anonymous that you should avoid people, places, and things. So you don't want to be around people that gamble. You don't want to go anywhere where gambling is. You don't want to just put yourself in any situation where you'd be tempted to gamble. The problem I think I have with that is like there's so many different situations where it becomes very like, can I do this but not this? Could is this okay but not this? I would say that I wouldn't go, and I would tell your friends to look for a different event, just because it's not worth the risk. But I understand why this would be like really frustrating. Were you in any kind of situation like that? Maybe like events at the casinos?
Um, no, not really. I think for me, once you self exclude, like you can't go on casino properties and things like that. But I think what really kind of got me in the cycle and is like the free gifts and things that
Mm,
they do. That was always like I would tell myself I'm not going back. But then I was like, oh, but I might get this air fryer that I could have gone to Walmart and bought for $60, but I spent thousands of dollars to get this air fryer. So I need to go get that $1,000 air fryer.
mm.
And those kinds of things. But I think for me, I never really was one for the events or any of that.
That
And
makes
I might have
sense.
missed the context of the question because I was reading the chat.
Well,
I was
it's
like,
okay.
I didn't realize there were so many chat things. So
Yeah, we've got a decent crowd here. Thank you all for being here so far. And you know, Usama, I know you asked a question. The reason that we didn't talk about the question is because you were talking about really specific cryptocurrency betting websites, and it was like three people in the chat probably know what you're saying. But to reframe your question that you asked in all caps, what do I do when I can't stop playing a slot even though I know I'm going to lose? Seek out help. In the description of this video, I have a 1 hour video on exactly what I did to quit gambling. I think that's a great place to start, my friend. But it's just too like niche specific, and this is already pretty niche. So it's like the idea that we would be talking about like a very specific slot provider, or a very specific casino would be it'd be tough. And then I wanted to just say, Wesley, thank you for the super chat and for becoming a member, my friend. No need to send any money at all, guys, but I do appreciate that, Wesley. Thank you very much. And I think there was a question along with it that I want to make sure we touch on because it didn't show through on the riverside of this side. But he said that South Africans spend $1 trillion or 1 trillion of their currency a year, and it was up 40%. I didn't know how bad gambling addiction was in South Africa. I don't think I know anything about South Africa. Have you heard that?
yeah, it's a huge issue in South Africa.
Mm,
Uh, and I get so many people I think who reach out. I think the resources are limited, but there are some resources. I've researched some of those myself, and to help some people. And so there are some resources that are specific throughout South Africa, Africa. Um,
mm,
and just there's a resource called gamblersinrecovery.com. You can find a
mm.
meeting anytime. They're all over the world. Um, you can get into a meeting and kind of find support that way as well, 24/7.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I forgot. I always forget to talk about gamblers in recovery. They've got meetings running 24/7, so it's a great resource to check out.
Yep.
Uh, let's see. We got a lot more questions that came in. Did stopping gambling lead to other bad habits like shopping addiction, food addiction, or overdoing it in the gym? You're nodding, so you want to take this one, Christina?
Yeah. So when I first stopped gambling, to know me is to really understand this, but I love shoes,
Mm,
and the money that was in my account because I wasn't gambling was scaring me, even though I could have been using it for so many other things, right? To catch up on debt, to um, put into retirement. There were so many other things I could have spent that money on, but it was really scaring me. And I felt compelled to gamble if it was in my account. And so I just started spending it. And I kept telling myself, well, I haven't really treated myself, because of this addiction for so long. And I just kept thinking, I'm just going to treat myself. But before you knew it, I had 20 pairs of shoes that I was never going to wear. And I had, fortunately by then I had a therapist, a sponsor, and my sister who were just like, one, your Starbucks habit is ridiculous. And two, you don't need all these shoes. And so that's when I really learned about kind of the internal issues part of it, and that gambling was a symptom and now spending is a symptom. And, that's the real difference between recovery and abstinence. Abstinence, you're not really dealing with the internal stuff. You're just not engaging in a certain behavior. But I just realized that my compulsiveness, or I like to say my self-destructive side, was like playing whack-a-mole with whatever was going to come up. And I was like, I'm going to knock this one out. And so then I started to tackle my spending and work on my relationship with my finances. And that was huge for me. And through all that work, I was able to build kind of self-awareness of like what could potentially be an issue. Social media became an issue too when I first started posting about my recovery and starting the Broke Girl Society. Anytime I post something, I would constantly check it and constantly see what it was doing. And I think too, I learned really early on that, one, I'm not a big fan of social media. I'm also in my mid 40s, right? So it's not like it was something that was just there for me my whole life. Does anybody remember MySpace? I'm just checking the crowd, checking the room. That was my first real kind of dabble in it. And so it really is just kind of building that self-awareness to be like, okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. So I need to work on this and work on this and work on this. But yeah, that cross occurring is very, very common in early recovery. And it can look like different things, depending on who you are.
Yeah. I was definitely drinking a lot more when I first stopped. But what I think it was more than anything was like filling my time. I was just gambling so much, like just such a high volume of gambling that now when you took it away, it's like, wow, there's so much time in the day. What do I do? And it was kind of easier to get through it if I was out drinking with my friends and getting through it really fast. So I never developed the compulsion with drinking that I had with gambling, but it definitely wasn't doing me any favors. And so that was a big thing to kind of fix in the beginning. So I went on I remember I called it a monk mode. I made a YouTube video about it that got like no views. It was my first thumbnail that I made by myself that I liked. And it was like, I'm going to go 90 days, no drinking, no drugs. I'm going to exercise every day. And then I did it and I was like feeling pretty good about it. But I'm just so extreme. It's like, it always has to be a lot of this thing or nothing at all of this thing. And still kind of seeking out the balance with most things in my life. But with gambling,
with you. I know.
Yeah, karaoke was fun. That was a good time. But it's still something to work on now. But yeah, we see a lot of cross addiction. We see a lot of people kind of channeling into other things. It's important to find something to do with your time that means something to you. And that begins to make things a little bit easier.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Once again, doing a little plug. We are 48, almost 49 minutes into this. We're going to be looking to go for maybe another half hour or so. Is that good with you, Christina?
That's good.
Cool. So if you're in the audience, the number one way that you can support us right now is just to leave a like on this video. If we get more likes on the video, YouTube pushes it out to more people, more questions, more answers. And that's the number one way you can support. Also, I have linked Christina in the description of this video. Make sure you give a follow to her social pages, even though she hates social media, just to make sure that we're supporting there as well. So
I do post occasionally. There is a question I want you to highlight.
Yeah. Who asked it?
I don't want to insult this person by trying to say their name.
What was the question?
It was talking to his friends. So I spoke to so many people about my gambling addiction problem, but they just don't understand. And this is like, I see this so much, here's the thing that I think I had to learn and other people have had to learn is like, not everybody's going to understand it. And we can't make people understand it. And what I see a lot too is people trying to find validation that they're struggling through other people's understanding that they're struggling. And so when you're talking to somebody who doesn't understand gambling addiction, like I remember when I told my husband, now ex-husband at the time, about my gambling, he was like, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You're just bad with money." And that was really hard to hear because I had been struggling. I mean, I was so upset with what I'd done to myself and my finances and just how it impacted him. And I was just so torn up. I was working with a therapist for 2 months before I brought him into it. And he had no understanding of it. And he had no willingness to understand it. And that really hurt me to the core. And it was just a lesson that I learned that not everybody's going to be able to understand what we're going through. Um, and we don't need that validation, even though I know it feels good when somebody is like, I really understand. And that's why it's so important to find communities of people who do understand. Because again, it's back to the serenity prayer of what we can control and what we can't. And we can't control other people's understanding. It's like we can explain it all we want, but we can't make people comprehend it. And and I think sometimes people sit in that spinning too long because they want that person to understand, I didn't mean to hurt you. This is what was really going on with me. And they just don't want to understand it. And there's nothing you can do about that. And that is the hardest feeling to feel. But all we can do is just keep working on ourselves, keep doing that living amends for ourselves, and I think that's why you and me spend so much of our time talking about this and how it's so impactful, so that maybe people will kind of learn, like, oh, I guess this really is something. It's not, but sometimes people aren't willing to, or they not willing, but they just can't see through their own pain in the moment to really understand what you're saying or going through.
Well said. I got very distracted trying to keep up with the question.
I know. They just keep popping up.
Because I saw one that I think we should definitely touch on. But again, I don't know that we have the answers to this, but we can try. Do we cut contact with people that are our family because of their gambling when we're trying to stop? I didn't have this experience, so I don't really think I'm that well suited to give you an answer here. But what I would say is conversations should be had for sure. And you can't make someone else stop, which I've learned the hard way, making TikTok saying you should stop and being told that I suck. But what would you say here? This is a really tough one.
I think for me, so I actually heard the best piece of advice a couple of months ago. I was in a panel that had some people who were part of Gam-Anon. And this lady, like, we were just having this conversation about enabling, right? Enabling behavior from like a loved one of a gambler, right? And she just said, like, what is the difference between enabling and supporting? And she said, well, supporting is when you support somebody who's on the right path, who's working recovery, working amends. Enabling is when you're enabling somebody on the wrong path, right? Who's still gambling, who's still causing harm. And that, for some reason, like, makes the most sense to me, but I've never, like, it was so directly said that I was like, you're absolutely right. Enabling behavior is knowing that they're not like, if you give them money, they're still engaging in the behavior, and you know that money is probably going to go to whatever they need. Where supporting them is helping them find the resources, outside of yourself, through. But to Rob's point, you can't make somebody stop. What you have to decide here, and this is a very personal decision, is their gambling causing you harm? Do you need to firm up your boundaries of what you'll accept in your life and what you won't? And as somebody who hasn't had that experience, like, I honestly can't even imagine having to make that choice. But you are absolutely entitled to set those boundaries and have that peace in your life. And it might encourage them to work on their stuff. There are a couple people, Rob, that you should have on, like Rhonda, or who are loved ones of a gambler. Jen, she is, like, grew up with parents, and that might be a really great thing to do, is to kind of have that perspective of a loved one, or especially because I have been seeing, like, in a TikTok trend as well, like, children of like adult children of gamblers, and the resentments they're carrying. And it's like they love their parents so much, but they're also tired of being the parent to the parents. And it's something that really needs to be talked about more.
Yeah. I'm going to be seeing Rhonda in Texas pretty soon. So I'm actually thinking about trying to record with her. I don't know how much free time I'm going to have as to if I can get it done, but we'll
Yeah.
record something. I don't know Jen, but we can talk about it
I'll,
after.
yeah, I'll connect
Yeah.
you.
Let's see what else we
Actually,
got.
Adam can connect you, to be honest.
Oh, cool. Nice. This was interesting. Did you try different methods of recovery that didn't suit you to find the right recovery? For me, I went to one GA meeting and then I was like, this is where I'm going to go forever. And so I didn't actually end up trying different things. I ended up doing GA for, 2 years really consistently. And I still go when I can. But that was kind of what did it for me. But what I was just really looking for when I was seeking out help was anyone to understand what I was going through. And the first group of people that I found, I was like, this is good enough. And that's where I began my recovery. Would it have been easier through a different method? I don't know. Maybe there was a method that was better suited to me. I just never found it. What was your experience?
Yeah, I think for me, from really early on, like I didn't know anything about recovery. I didn't know anything about gambling addiction. Um, and so I first called the GA hotline because that's somebody, my mom knew somebody who'd went to GA, and that's just what I knew to do, right?
Mm.
I didn't have the best experience. I got like some bored kid who was just like, somebody will text you. And I'm like, okay. So in that time, like I started researching kind of therapist and what I could do that way. I did end up going to my first GA meeting, and I was part of GA for the first year of my recovery. And I have mad respect for the program. It's a great program, but I think there's this understanding that GA is everywhere and it's big, and it's absolutely not. And especially if you live in state that's more rural, like our GA meetings, in-person meetings, are in the two main cities of our state. And so,
Yeah.
but most of the gambling harm is happening in the rural areas. And so, like, driving an hour and a half to a meeting isn't feasible. Fortunately, we have online communities and meetings now that make it a lot easier. But you have to expand your own recovery, right? You can't like it for me, it was all about curiosity. What is going to help? If something didn't help, I didn't just stop. I didn't use it as an excuse not to continue. I just said, okay, this isn't working for me. There's got to be something else, because I wanted my life back so much. And I've said this in plenty of interviews with you, Rob.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't want to live my life anymore at the end of my gambling. But it was the realization in that moment that I never really was giving myself the opportunity to live. I was just stuck in the cycle of my gambling. And it was just that understanding that I didn't want to end my life. I actually wanted to live my life. And because of my gambling harm, I wasn't doing that. And so that just ignited something in me that I was just like, I'm going to figure this out one way or another. And curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. If you listen to the podcast, if you know me at all, like if you go to a meeting and it wasn't for you, find another meeting.
Yeah.
Like there is going to be something that talks to you. There is going to be something that connects with you. Um, but you gotta get out of your own way, and you've got to be curious and figure that out. And that takes work. It takes energy. And I get some days you're just like, I don't have the energy for this. Like I want it just laid out in front of me. And unfortunately, it's just not that way.
Yeah.
But you learn so much about yourself, and you build so much within yourself by being curious and keeping at it.
Yeah. I hear all the time, like, I went to a GA meeting, I didn't like it, it was too religious, so I'm not gonna stop. I'm like, whoa, whoa, what do you mean? That's okay that you didn't like it. Like, why not try to find something else? And oh, there's nothing else. So many times because it's
So many things.
easier, right? It's just easier to say like, oh, I tried the thing that everyone said to do and it didn't work, so I can just keep gambling. And so a lot of times when I go to meetings like that and I see people come in for the first time, I never see them again. And that's just kind of the way it goes. You have to be ready to seek out that help. But as you were alluding to, there's different meetings, there's different things to try. And eventually you will find something that kind of clicks with you when you're ready. But if you're not ready to quit, nothing's going to click with you because you're going to find some reason that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, it
Well, it's
makes
just
sense.
like triggers, right? Like when you get
Mm,
triggered, you have two options of that. And I just talked about this in our Sunday meeting this morning. It's like when you have triggers, you can use it as an excuse to continue the
mm,
behavior. Be like, oh, something triggered me. And there's real, like, there's validity between being triggered, right? Something can honestly trigger you, but it's what you do in that moment that changes it for the rest of your life. Like in that moment, you can be triggered and keep engaging in the behavior. Like, oh, I got in a fight and I just wanted to escape the emotions from it. Okay, that was what I used. That's what caused me to gamble a lot. But then at one point, you have to be, when you're triggered in that moment, you have to be like, I'm going to unpack this. Why am I constantly triggered by this? And I'm going to unpack this and I'm going to do the work so I don't live this triggered life anymore. That things don't trigger me in the same way anymore. That's, I use that as an opportunity to work on the issue, the internal issue. Why am I triggered by this? I want to get to the bottom of this so it doesn't control me anymore. And so there's so many ways that you can work on the situation, and it doesn't have to be what somebody else did, but you can take what somebody else did and be like, you can piece it together for what works with you.
Mm-hmm. That was really well said.
Yeah.
While you were talking, we had a message come in that I think we should look at. Not a question, but I want my life back. I feel like I'm at my ending point. When we get to this point in a gambling problem where we can't figure out the solution, we often feel like there's nothing else that we can do. But there's always something else that we can do. There's always a way back towards a better life. What would you say to someone who's in this position? It doesn't have to just be Josh here. It can be anyone that's struggling, that feels like, I've tried everything. Nothing's helping. What do I do?
I was there. Like I was there in that moment. I can still, like, sitting right here, take myself back to sitting in my car thinking, well, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to do it this way. And it was in that moment that I found the most hope I'd ever felt. It was like, I can make a different choice. I can do some work. I can't do it alone, but I can do it. And I mean, I just hope that you know that you are loved and cared about, and there is a way forward. There's so many resources out there. There's so many ways that you can address this. And if you're struggling to make the first steps, like, just do the most smallest of steps, take it 1 minute at a time, one day at a time. And it really sometimes is just breaking it down and, learning techniques to, like, urge surf and, getting a therapist involved to help you untangle some of those triggers. But the biggest message of all is what we've gone through with our gambling or any other addiction or disorder is that it doesn't define who we are. It might feel like it in this moment, but the real work is untangling yourself from that thought of, this is how I feel because of all this going on in my life. And it's like, you are so much more than what's happening in this moment. And it really is just about building that life that you don't want to escape from through gambling or anything else. So, there, I just wish I could hug you, but there is a way forward, and there's so many resources out there. Rob has so many resources available. There's podcasts, there's communities, there's so many people who understand and can help you by sharing their own experience and what helped them.
Yeah, so I hope, Josh, that you look into some of those things. In the description of this video, of course, there's links to resources, as well as links to videos that you can check out, and of course, links to Christina's stuff, if you were looking to listen to a podcast of someone else going through the same thing. This one is going to be, I can take this one. So, can you still watch things like March Madness or the Super Bowl or baseball without temptation, or do you have to stay clear because of bad memories? I can still watch sports, but they just don't have the same interest that it used to have. So I'll watch a game if I'm hanging out with friends and we're watching a game, or family, or we're doing some kind of party, like a Super Bowl party, to watch it. But like for example, the Eagles, I think they're 4-0. They just won today. I watched 5 minutes of the second quarter and 3 minutes of the fourth quarter because I got bored. Like, we're good at football, but it's just kind of boring to watch. So it's not that I have the bad memories that I can't watch it. It's just I used to care about every single play because it was determining whether or not I'd be able to pay my rent. Now I just watch it and it's just doesn't have the same spice to it. So you don't have to necessarily avoid it unless it's like every time you watch, you feel an insane temptation to gamble and you have to, but it just doesn't quite do it for me anymore. And I'm okay with that. I mean, there's lots of other things, I binged an entire Spanish series called A Billionaire Bunker on Netflix. It was all right. It was the same group that did you ever watch Money Heist?
Nope.
Oh, that was great. You should watch Money Heist on Netflix. But it was the same group that made that, so I was like, I'll give it a try. And it was fine. It was better than watching the Phillies games that don't matter anymore. Yeah, so yes and no. You can watch them, but you don't have to.
And in
Uh,
recovery, your interest may change. Like you
yeah.
can be a fan of like sports and things like that. I'm not a sports fan, but whatever it is that you really love about the game, I would hope that recovery takes you back to that. Once you take the action of gambling out of it, like I really hope that it allows you to go back to the love of the game. And I've heard so many people be able to say that, and that's really nice.
Yeah. By the way, replying to our previous question, Josh is still in the chat. Appreciate you being here, Josh.
Yeah.
And then we had this going to my first GA meetings next month. Have a nice week, everyone. Essie, that's
Nice.
awesome. Congratulations on entering recovery. Let's see. And then we got a little shout out in the chat. Hello, my friend. How we doing?
Hi.
And so if you have any questions about gambling, gambling addiction, or addiction recovery, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're going to be live for a couple more minutes here. Christina, what would you say to someone that's on the border of like, hey, I'm thinking that this is becoming a problem, but I'm not sure if I want to stop yet?
I think that's where a lot of people kind of come to this place and they're like researching it. And I think it really is just kind of getting back to your behavior around your gambling. Like, what is it that is the issue? Again, if it's causing a problem in your life, it really needs to be addressed before it it really becomes a problem. Um, it's a very progressive disorder, and but it really is just kind of understanding your relationship around gambling. Why is it so important to gamble? Like gambling, again, is just meant to be entertaining. It's not meant to have any impacts on our life. It's not meant to dictate where we travel for vacation because there might be a casino there. It's not meant to, take over your love of sports. It's not meant to impact, your finances in any way. So it really is just kind of getting back to, what kind of place does it have in my life? And, if you feel like you still want to enjoy it, but you're not sure if you're doing it in a safe way, you put the barriers in place. You set your, I hate saying this, but it really is, set a budget and a time. And if you're constantly finding yourself, going above those limits, then maybe you need to step back for a little while and find other things that can be really helpful, or to engage in.
Let's take a couple more questions, probably, maybe like 2 or 3 more.
He's really carrying the chat, or
Yeah,
they
he is.
they
He's
are really
asking some
carrying.
great questions.
Yeah.
How do you deal with knowing that you're never going to feel the highs that gambling brings? And then we've kind of touched on the second part already. Yes, stopping gambling can lead people into other addictions if you're not addressing the core issue. But how do you deal with knowing that you're never going to feel those highs again? At this point, I don't care. But I think in the beginning I did. And I was like, oh man, like it was so much fun. I'm never going to feel like that again. Nothing's ever going to be that fun. Now at this point, like I'm just so pissed off with the way that casinos market to people, take advantage of people, push things onto people. Like the thrill isn't worth feeling like I'm being abused and, and used by this giant corporate entity. But I understand like the sentiment of the question, right? I think that over time you begin to find enjoyment in things in life again. And it's not so much like I'm never gonna feel this thrill again. It's like, yeah, that's okay. That's something I used to do, but it's not what I do now. But it's always hard in the beginning to tell someone that because you're so used to feeling that thrill. You're so accustomed to it. I don't particularly care at this point, though. How are you feeling about it, Christina?
Yeah, same. I mean, I think when you leave the gambling behind, you really just start to bring other things into your life again, that curiosity piece. Like I started a podcast and I really found a purpose in sharing this message and creating, messages around women and gambling harm and creating spaces for women to find recovery. So I found a lot of purpose and passion in that.
Mm.
I just realized that I don't have a need to chase those highs anymore. Like, because for me, the highs always came with a really low lows. And I just want peace in my life. I want some type of balance in my life. I don't want to be really, really high because I'm doing really good gambling and then be really, really low because I lost it all. And then trying to figure out who am I going to lie to, how I'm going to pay my bills, all of these things. So for me, it was just kind of that realization that I didn't really, if I never have that high from gambling again and again, by the end of my gambling, I wasn't feeling that at all. It was just low, low, low. So it's easier for me to say in this moment, and I understand that. But for me, the peace my life has today is so much more valued than chasing highs of any kind. I can feel really good working out, but again, I'm 47. I'm freaking tired. Like, I don't want to be out all night gambling or on my phone chasing whatever losses. Like, when you kind of move away from whether it's gambling or drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it is, like when you move away from those compulsions and go find a new normal, like, shoot, you find the energy to start a podcast about your hatred of clowns or something that you really like. You know what I
I
mean?
hate
Like, you can
clowns.
do anything. And so it's, and that to me just adds so much more to my life than
Mm.
setting in a, and of course I was a casino gambler, so setting in a dark, smoky hole, and wasting my life away. Like, it,
Yeah.
there's a very big difference in what I value now.
Totally. It's the lows are not, the highs are not worth the lows. Is is another piece to take away from that. But I hate clowns too. Clowns are awful. They're the
They don't
worst.
bug me, but my brother-in-law hates them so bad.
Well, I understand him completely. And I guess seeing that we're lacking any questions to wrap up on, I think we're probably going to be wrapping up pretty soon. If you've been in the chat, do me the favor of checking to see if you're subscribed to the channel, because if you're not, would love to have you join this community. I post content each and every day on gambling, gambling addiction, and addiction recovery. And also in the description of this video is links to Christina's website. Christina, tell them what you're all about to wrap up.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess I pretty much said it throughout, but I really have taken on a purpose of just talking about my gambling harm and sharing it. I did it so much this year that I am absolutely exhausted. But I know that good is coming from that. People are starting to understand that, yeah, the news shows gambling through a very male focused young man sports
Mm,
betting lens, because that's what the topics are these days, and that is a big issue. But women are gambling just as much as men, to the same amounts of harm, and it really impacts so much more than just ourselves. It impacts, what do they say, it impacts 8 to 10 people. Our
mm,
gambling behaviors do, whether you recognize it or not. Like, somebody is feeling the impacts of whether you're present, whether you're, the financial harms. But even when we think bigger, like the community, of how we're not engaged in our community, how we're not, doing, trying to do good in other ways. um Gambling really, really impacts so much more than just our time and our finances and our relationships. And so I think for me, it's just when I look at the female lens of gambling, breaking those societal ideas of how women should be in this world, of like, how could you be somebody struggling with gambling? You're a mother, you're a partner, like, you should know better, you should do these things. And it's just like, that's not fair. um Addiction doesn't discriminate, it doesn't care anything about you other than that you have issues, and it likes to feed off of issues. And so,
mm,
really just talking more about why women should have spaces that help them find recovery, that we need to do a lot of work to break the shame and stigma around gambling harm, so that women feel safe to seek the support that they need. A lot of harms are happening and they're just not talked about. Like, a lot, there's so much to the underworld of gambling and how crime and impact really happens. And, women who are struggling with addiction, gambling addiction, whatever, um, they get preyed upon in ways that are just awful and not talked
mm,
about. And so I think it's just so important to be able to share that message, to share my story, to do this work in hopes that everybody feels safe to seek the support that they absolutely deserve. And that no matter, everybody in this chat who's feeling the impacts of gambling harm, like, you deserve to have a life that feels good, healthy, a life that you don't want to escape from. And it's going to take work, but you're absolutely worthy of that. And so, yeah, that's what I'll continue to do.
If it's not already, I think you should make your motto "Building a life that you don't want to escape from." That
Oh,
was your
it
quote.
already
We
is.
led. It
If you
is
know
good,
me,
good.
yeah.
We led with that in like I think 2 or 3 videos that you've done on the channel because I think I've
Oh,
heard you say it a couple
were
times.
you joking? We're like, you should
No,
use that as your motto? Because I'm like,
it should
that's all I
actually
ever
be the
say.
motto. It should actually, yeah, it should actually be the motto because I think it's like we led with it when we make a video, like a podcast. We think of like what are the 3 things that were said that were like the most, not necessarily the most impactful, but like the most like viscerally like reactive, and that's always whenever we do an interview with you, that's always in the top 3.
Yeah.
So we always lead with it, but. Yeah, so if you're in the audience, once again, urge you to check out all the links in the description, including Christina's website, and also a video on how I quit gambling and how I stayed clean since I did quit. And I guess on that, we're going to be calling it a day. So thank you for everyone that asked questions. If we didn't get to them, my apologies. Hopefully, we have a video on the channel that answers your question. But if not, feel free to leave it as a comment on a video, and I'll do my best to make a video about it in the future. So, Christina, thanks for being here. Thanks to everyone in the chat. And let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.